This is From Now On. I'm Lisa Phillips. From Now On is a podcast that goes beyond the headlines to offer intimate stories of survival and life after trauma. Each week, I'll be sharing my own survival story while bringing other survivors and experts to help recognize red flags, educate on ways to advocate for yourself, and hold abusive power accountable. From now on, we educate, we prepare, we heal, we empower. Just a heads up, this episode contains discussions of sexual assault, and some listeners may find it upsetting. We also encourage listeners to prepare themselves emotionally before listening. Hello, I'm Lisa Phillips, and I'm so happy you've joined me today on From Now On. Last episode, I shared how I'm a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein and others involved in his web of co-conspirators. Today, I'm going to begin to tell my story. So I grew up as an Air Force brat. I moved every few years, each move shaping my identity in very unique ways. My earliest memories, I lived in England, followed by years in the States, and then back to Europe where I graduated high school in Belgium. My multicultural heritage was a tapestry of my mother's Pakistani, Indian, Italian roots and my father's Scottish, Norwegian, West Indian background. In a time when not many people looked like me, I often felt like an exotic curiosity. In the mid-90s, the world wasn't as diverse as it is today. Well, families weren't as diverse. People would often ask, "Wow, what are you?" And I'd simply reply, "I guess I'm a mutt." My parents never taught me to identify with one specific race. I'm actually thankful for that. I felt more connected to the European way of life and thinking than to the American one, probably because I spent my teen years in Europe. I always felt different and often misunderstood, yet I embraced my uniqueness. And despite feeling out of place, my tall, thin frame and friendly nature made me really popular, especially with the boys. By 16, I was already modeling for magazines, and fashion was my passion. I dreamt of becoming an international model and an actor and surrounded by creative, different, and worldly people who shared my love for travel and learning. At 19, I started to travel to fashion hubs like London and Paris, spent a lot of time in Cape Town and LA, and eventually I settled in South Beach with a top modeling agency. I was living the life I had always dreamed of, shooting movies, tons of TV commercials, and reveling in the excitement of the industry. Then I moved to New York City, and that felt like I was hitting the big time. I worked consistently with a great agency, flying to exotic locations for shoots, attending the best parties, and living a fulfilling, joyous life. So one day, my agent called with exciting news. I had booked a magazine cover and a 6-page story alongside another model from my agency. I was over the moon, to say the least. So the crew and the other model, she was an incredibly beautiful blonde Polish girl, and I flew to Tortola in the British West Indies for the shoot. We had an amazing time, but the photographer, he made me uncomfortable with his unwanted advances. It was, unfortunately, a common issue in the modeling business at the time, and desperate to escape the photographer's attention, I eagerly agreed and accepted when the other model invited me to spend our free time, a free day, on a friend of hers' private island. She assured me her friend Jeffrey was trustworthy and he was super wonderful to her. So we boarded the boat he sent. I don't even know why the clients let us go. And we sailed across the crystal blue clear waters. To my surprise, we had actually arrived at Little St. Jeff's. My time on the island was a mix of relaxation and a little unease. We hung out by the pool with 2 other young blonde girls who I thought was my age or around my age. One of them was particularly affectionate with an older gentleman in the pool. I remember that. And as evening fell, we went to our quarters to prepare for dinner. Still feeling great from the day so far. So dinner time arrives, and I'm seated at this long table with 3 other girls from the day. We're feasting on fresh seafood and talking and laughing and truly enjoying getting to know each other. It's a really fun time. Not long after that, a handsome man with a charming smile walks up. He introduces himself as Jeffrey, shakes my hand and kisses my cheek and sits down right next to me. For hours, Jeffrey focused his attention on all of us, but it was mostly on me. He was incredibly charming and he had a sharp, witty humor that only really intelligent people kind of possess. And we talked extensively about traveling, something I loved, and had traveled a lot. And I'd already visited by that time a lot of countries, so we kind of had a lot to talk about that and art. I had recently returned from a trip in South Africa, and he found that really interesting. Jeffrey asked a lot of questions that night, the kind that no man usually bothers to ask you. Stuff about my childhood, how I grew up, where I lived, intimate questions. But I still felt really safe by his questions. It wasn't anything that made me feel on guard or... So I had lived in England growing up. Well, actually, when I mentioned living in Oxford, he had shared some stories of his time visiting there. He casually asked me if I wanted to meet a prince. And I said, sure. And right then, a dark-haired man, the guy I recognized from the pool, walked up and he shook my hand. He stayed only briefly before leaving. What stands out most from my dinner was my deep conversation with Jeffrey. He gave me life-changing advice, making me feel safe, heard, seen, and most importantly, I felt understood. He told me that I was a remarkable person and that he felt like I was powerful and I had a lot to achieve in this world. It was something I had never heard from a man before. I had always felt the opposite from men. But I believed his words and I thought, wow, I'm so lucky to have met this incredible person. So after dinner, we showered and we got ready for bed. We were just hanging out together on the bed, just like talking and feeling great. And then there was a knock at the door. The woman said, Jeffrey is ready for his massage. And I looked at the girl and I said, what massage? I'm not doing a massage. And she said, oh, don't worry. Jeffrey likes massages. No big deal. And I said, I have no clue how to massage someone. I've never done it before. And she's like, it's okay. Just chill. Just follow my lead. And so, confused and not knowing what the heck was going on, I trusted her. It can't be that bad. I mean, the man was pretty incredible a few hours earlier. And so I followed her to his quarters. We walked through the door. He was lying on a massage bed, face down, and he was naked. I started backing out of the room and I said, oh, I can't do this. Kind of like giggling nervously because I thought everything was just turning kind of weird. She said, no, you have to. Just do what I do. At this point, I remember thinking, well, I guess I have to. Let me just go through this, realizing I'm on an island and this girl knows him. She feels safe. I felt safe before. She told me she loved him and he was amazing. So I thought, okay, let me just do as she says. So I go in. Next, she just takes her top off and instructs me to do the same. And I'm like, what? Wait a second. Topless massage. I mean, I grew up in Europe, kind of, so being topless wasn't that big a deal of me, but in this scenario, I was just thinking, what have I gotten myself into, Lisa? I just kind of wanted to run out of the room, jump into the ocean and start swimming away, but I knew I couldn't. So I just chose to follow what she did. It was just a topless massage. I'll do it and I'll leave. So Jeffrey was being very playful, non-threatening. He was asking a lot of questions about boyfriends and trying to make us feel very comfortable. His questions were very personal now. They were a little different than before. I know he was trying to make me relax and be comfortable. I wasn't comfortable. The whole thing was really weird and it was really awkward. It was starting to get a little violating. It didn't feel like what we were doing was real consent. But again, I just kind of froze. A little fear was taking over me and I just kind of just did what she was doing. But he was just too good, because this is how grooming confuses the victim. He eased into this abuse. He gave me so much attention that I had never had for hours. He used an innocent girl the same age to act as if nothing was wrong. This is simple fun, right? He had us actually work on real massage techniques, telling me where to apply pressure, but it was all kind of between touching me a little bit more and more, a little bit more. And he would wait for me to kind of do what she was doing. Until after a little while, it wasn't really playful anymore. The energy shifted. Things started to hurt. And he ended up sexually assaulting me in the room that night. And her. So we quickly left the room. We went straight to our quarters. We showered. I was trying to scrub off the pain, the shame, the disgust. I was really confused I just didn't really understand what had happened. I remember that night, I just laid awake all night, just staring at the ceiling. I kept thinking, or being scared, there was going to be another knock at the door for another massage. Thankful that didn't happen. And once the sun was up, I remember I just woke her up and was like, we need to get out of here. And we did. We got on the boat. We left the island. We went back to Tortola, where the clients were waiting for us. And I can tell you in that moment that I didn't feel like the same person anymore. Welcome to From Now On. Ocean Shapiro is a trauma therapist at Woven Together Trauma Therapy. They work with couples and individuals and specialize in dissociative disorders, religious trauma, cult survivorship, as well as working with 2SL, LGBTQ, IA+ folks, and those with poly, platonic, kink, and other alternative relationship formation issues. They are also a consultant for Sensitive Revolution, an organization that works with leaders to cultivate insight and self-awareness. Hi, Ocean.
Hi, Lisa.
Welcome to From Now On.
Thank you so much.
I'm really honored that you're here today. This is a very important conversation, something really near and dear to my heart, unfortunately. But I'm hoping you could answer some questions that will help our listeners understand trauma a little bit more. So, Ocean, you're a trauma therapist.
Yes, I am.
How do you help people through the process of trauma and coming out and telling your story?
Oof, that's a really good question. So my specialties are dissociative disorders, religious trauma, and cult survivorship.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, and sexual assault, stalking, intimate partner violence. What my goal is to walk people through the process of recovery in such a way where we can tell our story and feel embodied in it. We can process what happened to us. We can also feel like as we navigate our healing journey, we're present with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So a lot of the time I work with folks where it's really hard to know what's real because what happened to them is so painful. My goal is to work with what their body's natural wisdom knows.
Mm.
My goal is also to help them work through the large emotions that we often have held over from too much too fast, which is all that trauma is. And then to try and weave that together into some type of meaning that they can take away from it instead of getting stuck in the eternal why, right? Why did this happen? As opposed to how did I manage it? What happened as a result? Where am I now? It's like a process of location.
Mm.
And then on the side, I have these fancy tricks where I do EMDR with folks.
Mm.
I help them desensitize that really charged emotion that comes with memory so that they can sit with it and understand it better and
Mhm.
digest it more. And I do ketamine assisted psychotherapy. So I follow folks through an
Oh, wow.
intentional journey where
Mhm.
they can really discover more for themselves about things like what trust means, both of the self and others, especially after having it be ripped away from them.
Mm. Yeah, I've never really thought of that, finding a meaning in your trauma to be able to process it.
It's one of these
Then,
things. Tell me more.
well, I don't know. It's just, I've never heard that. And I've never thought of what kind of meaning could have come out of it. I've thought of, why did this happen to me? Right? There must be something I can do, just something like this. Coming forward and talking about things and hoping others can share their story as well. So it's been over 15 years for me. So it's been really hard to it's just been really hard to tell my story. Every time I would, even though it's been so long ago, I would almost be like I was still there in that room.
Absolutely.
So how does someone process that trauma where they're able to have a conversation with loved ones, friends and family, and tell them, because there's so much judgment and shame that we know comes with it. How does
So,
someone get to that point?
absolutely. So, I also want to say one of the things that I do is I work from an attachment lens,
Mm.
right? So, I'm really interested in, based off of your earlier attachments, whatever you're comfortable with in session sharing, how do we ask for what we need? How connected are we to that need? How connected are we to how we're asking for it? And do the two need to change? And I'm prefacing what I'm saying with that because I have this technique I use that a lot of therapists use. They just don't put it as succinctly, maybe.
Mm.
It's this idea that I think is really invaluable to survivors, which is if you start to tell me your story in a therapeutic setting, where hopefully I've earned your trust, which I'm supposed to work for, by the way. We don't
Mhm.
just walk into any therapist's office
Mm-mm.
and trust them, right? We wait until we feel comfort there and safety there. And after that, we can either choose to lean in to telling a story. So if I notice that you're in the middle of what happened 15 years ago, I'd ask, wait,
Mm.
pause. Do we want to go further into this or do we want to lean back? Lean
Mm.
in or lean back? What does it mean to lean in? What I'm asking you actually is how can we organize this story right now? Do you want to organize it with me?
Mm.
Because when too much too fast happens, we tuck it away
Yeah.
desperately into our
Oh,
mind,
yeah.
whatever we can, right?
Right.
It comes so fast.
Mm-hmm.
And in tucking it away, that's where we get triggers. Our brain is trying to take these little bits of what we
Mm-hmm.
remember and go, wait, maybe that's the danger right there, right? And so we can isolate it,
Right.
but we also lose a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
By storing things in this way, we can't make sense of it.
That's the biggest thing for me, is being confused by it, not really knowing how to feel.
And so when I say organizing it, what I mean is different tactics. For instance, in a therapeutic setting, we can separate out the facts. I just ask you to tell me the facts as you remember them.
Mm.
I don't care about what
Okay.
actually happened. I care about what you remember
Mm-hmm.
because I care about your vantage point. How you felt as a result separately. It can get annoying, Lisa. I'll be
Right.
like, oh, wait. Let's save that for column B.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Column C. What did we need
Mm-hmm.
because of what happened and how we felt? And what do we need now? So these types of things are kind of our emergency parachute back to the present,
Mm-hmm.
where then we can lean back and do what? We can feel, first off, agency, because we feel like, oh gosh, it's not just happening forever again. I'm not stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to lean back, and we can do
Mhm.
that with grounding exercises. Lots of different ones depending on the person,
Right.
but also in leaning back, wow, I was a witness there who you trusted to your story.
Mm.
What was that like? And we can
Right.
talk about what it was like to share that space together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we share in a therapeutic setting.
Right. So each person individually needs a different type of therapy, it seems, that works for them. Because I know for me, talk therapy, just talking things out,
Oof.
one, and not feeling safe with the person to really tell my story, it didn't work for me for years. It wasn't until I did EMDR, which you
Mm.
spoke about that you do, That was the only thing that has worked for me. And the therapist I was very safe. And he wouldn't let me tell my story until I felt safe. He would sit there and wait. 10 minutes would go by, until I felt good. And he would always say, you don't have to. Today's not the day. That made me feel really good. So back to the other question with the family,
Hmm.
because telling a therapist and working through the different techniques is one thing, but how do you get to the point with a loved one or family? Just because for me, I felt like I was silenced for years because when I started speaking out after Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019, and I started speaking out just a little bit in documentaries and bringing things up to family and friends, I started noticing nobody wanted to really talk to me about it. And it felt so like more shame, and I felt demeaned and almost worthless that they wouldn't open up their time and heart to speak to me. I remember one episode where, I was in a relationship, I was madly in love, I had joined my family with someone, and this is right after he had died. And the boyfriend was in the room with me when I saw on the news that Jeffrey had died. And I still now, I had such a visceral reaction to it because I didn't know how I was going to feel about it. I didn't know how I felt about it in that moment. I was confused, or I didn't know if I felt like a mentor or a dad had died, and then I was angry, and this person had witnessed that. And then weeks went on and they never asked me, hey, I saw you had this reaction. Are you okay? What's going on? And then one day I remember we were driving and he was on the way to he was buying a Tesla. I just remember that because we were in the car, and I looked at him and I was like, I really would like to tell you what happened to me and why I had that reaction. And he put his hand up to my face, said, I don't want to hear about it. And I remember that was like a defining moment in my life because, like, how could someone that I love not want to hear about something that I went through that was traumatizing? And after that, it's just silence. Like, I didn't even want to speak about it because I didn't feel safe anymore. So that's why I asked that question. I really feel like that our listeners feel a lot like how I felt that day when you're trying to speak out and say what happened to you, but nobody wants to listen or support you or be there for you.
And so the question is, I'm really sitting with just the physical act of saying, not only do I not want to hear about it, but I don't want this from you.
Hmm.
As if it was your trauma that you're bringing to him.
Mm-hmm.
What a profound misunderstanding of human pain. Is the question, how do we work up to the point where we can share with loved ones? Or is it, how do we share with loved ones?
Yeah, that's my questions.
I think it depends on what we need. There is so often this feeling that if I say what happened to me, not only might it be rejected,
Mm-hmm.
but also that will make it real.
Yeah.
And
It
what do I
does.
do with my pain then, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like you're looking for help to understand it, not looking for judgment or blame or to be further shamed, but I'm trying to process this. Can you help me out here?
And that's the first step. I think it's figuring out what you need. As a result of telling your story, what would be your fantasy, your pie in the sky? What would happen that would soothe your heart, that would smooth out the edges, the rough edges of that pain?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's, I want you to fix it, oh my gosh, don't I feel that desperation? Doesn't that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
After going through something so upsetting that tears your heart apart.
Mm-hmm.
And yet no one person can fix this pain. Just like your therapist would wait and say, if today's not the day, he couldn't magically summon your recovery,
Mm-mm.
couldn't magically summon your healing. That actually had to do with you, time, the right people around you, not being around probably that particular partner,
Mm-hmm.
being around people that wouldn't physically block you off
Mm-hmm.
and silence you.
That was a learning lesson. That's what I realized in that moment. I'm not safe with this person. And I need to find people who I feel safe with, who can support me. Yeah.
That's something you can identify as this
Mhm.
is something that I want as a result of telling my story. I want to feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. We can work with that. I want to feel support. Okay, what type of support? There are many types of support. What about from one person in particular, the person that you're thinking of telling? What type of support do they
Yeah.
usually give? Do you think you can get that from them?
Mm-mm.
Right?
No.
If not, understanding. Okay, great. What type of understanding? This person that we're thinking of, how do they usually express understanding of you? Have they ever
Mm-mm.
truly made you feel understood?
Mm-mm.
In that case, then we think about who else we might tell.
Yeah.
And that might be a forum where we see lots of people giving support that might just be a couple of words on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
but they mean far more than the
Mhm.
people in our lives that we could imagine telling.
Mm.
That anonymity means that we can receive that support more
Mm-hmm.
accessibly, right?
Like-minded community.
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But that also could be someone who you don't actually see in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
It could be someone back from high school. Who knows? I'm dating myself. It could be someone back from school that you haven't
Mhm.
talked to in a while
Right.
that you just feel would intuitively understand.
Right.
But we identify the why in terms of why we're telling them and what we might need from this.
Mm.
And I think that brings us to the place of being ready to talk about it.
Right. It was the other survivor sisters to me. That was
Tell
when
me
I
more.
when I felt really comfortable, safe,
Why?
because they had also experienced the same thing or something very similar.
And what could they give you as a result of that?
The support I needed.
How
Mm-hmm.
does that support look different from someone who's not a survivor?
Mm-hmm.
These are things you intuitively knew,
Right.
no?
Yeah.
That's the feeling. And I feel
Mm.
like we lose that shape. It's almost like when I talk about the body's natural wisdom, I seem like Ocean, therapist from LA, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about some woo-woo kind of concept.
Right.
I'm talking about that sense of knowing in your gut, in your
Mhm.
heart, behind your chest cavity, behind your chest plate.
Yeah.
Oh, that sense of I'm seen right
Mhm.
now.
Yes, we need to be seen.
Knowing that you'll get that from other survivors.
Mm-hmm.
No one could teach that to you.
Mm-hmm.
You felt that.
Mm-hmm.
We lose that embodied sense of self in too much too fast.
Mm. Yeah.
It's finding that again, right? It's not as easy as just, oh, let me identify, let me write down in my journal what I need from this experience. No, what do you feel you need?
Mm-hmm.
Find that.
Mhm.
Find that feeling.
Yes, that's been the search.
Right? What might that
Mhm.
setting look like?
Mm-hmm.
What might those people be like? It might not just be family. It might not ever be family. It might be your family.
Why do you think that talking about your story is a healing process in itself?
Oof, there's so many reasons. So first, we lose that agency
Mm-hmm.
in what happened to us. When we're telling that story of our trauma, we're telling a story where inherently we didn't have the ability to pace ourselves. We didn't have the ability to meter out what was happening, right? We essentially were forced
Mm-hmm.
in any of a number of ways to experience something that was inherently violating. By organizing our story and retelling it, really observing my words here, right? A
Mhm.
thoughtful retelling. So we think about it beforehand.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be perfect. No one's perfect. There's no right way to tell it. That's not human. What's
Mhm.
human is how you're connecting to it in the moment. But thinking about how you're going to organize your narrative
Mhm.
gives you that agency back
Mhm.
that you lost.
Mhm.
And connecting to, when I was talking to meaning or talking about meaning, it connects you to the ending.
Mhm.
So one thing that happens is we get stuck in that forever loop of what
Mhm.
happened, right? But we can actually talk about not only when the story ended, when too much too fast stopped happening, but what resulted,
Mm.
how we managed it, like I was talking about earlier, I think, right?
Yeah.
These aspects of it, that's where we find meaning.
Mhm.
It's not from the actions that occurred in the
Mm.
story.
Right.
It's from the continuation of your story.
Mhm.
But then beyond that, it's about making knowable and identifiable your pain. If we just sit with what
Yeah.
hurts, right, we
You have
can't
to sit with
digest it.
Right.
But in telling it, we express it, we make that digestible. So we're not just organizing the story like we would in a therapy room, for instance, in a therapy
Right.
session, to make that digestible and more linear. We're making our feelings digestible.
So you're saying that suppressing it, which most of us have done for so many years, especially in these assault incidences that are popping up in Hollywood, and most people are silenced, quiet, ashamed, so they keep it quiet and suppressed for many, many years. How much more harm does that do to you than when finally we're speaking out, we're talking about it, we're going through the healing process, which isn't easy either.
At all.
But sometimes I have many friends who went through the same type of abuse I went through, but suppress it, don't talk about it. Is that better?
No, it's difficult because it needs to be the cornerstone of the therapy I give is consent.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I talk about pacing.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I talk about, do you want to lean in as a question, right? I pause, do you want to lean in or lean back?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people go, I want to lean in and don't stop me.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, okay,
Okay.
it's time for me to be a safe witness.
Okay.
I will still ground with you. I will still watch the clock to make sure that I don't send you out into this world feeling so raw.
Mm.
Right? But it's ultimately your choice. Why? Because, again, you deserve that agency back.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone chooses not to tell anyone,
Mm-hmm.
I have to respect that decision.
Right.
I want to make that
Yeah,
clear,
me
right?
too. Right.
And yet, when we keep those emotions inside, I like to imagine a child who's basically told that their internal world isn't real. So keep all those emotions to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're just too sensitive. You're being dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
You're being selfish. These things even hurt to say, don't they? And to
Yeah.
hear.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about, just imagine in your head a small child.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, none of your emotions matter. In
Mhm.
fact, there are rules here. Do as you're told,
Mm-hmm.
right? Be seen, not heard. These types of things.
Sounds like my childhood.
Ugh. When we have this type of childhood, we grow up into adults who then feel like their emotions need to be hidden.
And your emotions don't matter.
Your emotions don't matter. And we can't point out blame. We can't point out when someone's hurting us. Because no, they must not be hurting us. The
Mhm.
rules go that we must be hurting ourselves. What did we do? How did we contort into a shape that was then to become a burden,
Mhm.
right? And so
My emotions are someone's burden.
they
So
are.
you stay silent.
You stay silent, and what does that turn into in the body? That turns into a sensation of, I don't get hurt, I hurt myself.
Hmm.
These wounds are just something I need to live with. They become our reality. It's just living
Yes.
with pain that's unvoiced.
Mhm.
And it becomes disconnection, loneliness, and just silence, hiding.
Mhm.
That's not a life.
What it manifests into illness, disease. Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
In
And
fact,
speaking out about your trauma isn't easy either. But I know every time I would in therapy, a few hours, even a day or two after, I was not happy. I just was processing everything. It wasn't easy. But then after a day or two, then you start feeling good that you've kind of let it go. Little by little, you're letting it go and you get lighter and lighter.
well, and that's part of it, right? That organization of it, that connecting to it in a way that makes sense to you,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense out of not having to shoulder the blame.
Right.
That's the process. It's externalizing it. It's putting it out there. It makes us feel raw. And then it actually shows us something that we can look at and say, this is where I was hurt,
Mm-hmm.
not this.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
this, right? This can still hurt.
Yeah, it's over here.
It's over
This
here.
is where it happened, but I don't have to own it anymore.
No. In fact, it was never mine. I don't have to own that if I don't want to. It's my experience. It's my right to do what I want with it. But I didn't cause this,
Right.
right?
You're
So
innocent.
I can distance myself from it. But that distance only happens by that intimate reoccurrence in different ways, right? I don't want you to have to relive it. But if that's the way that you choose to tell your story, is that you feel like you're back in it and then it's received,
Mm-hmm.
guess what? It's been received now.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't just been forced upon you. So I would say, yes, it's far healthier. And also you get the advantage of human connection through it instead of that feeling of disconnection. Imagine the exact connection that you probably deserved at the time and you didn't get.
You're so right about that. You have to be really safe to tell a traumatic story because a lot of times you interviews and they're asking questions and they're just digging, digging, digging. And I know they're just doing it and it's
Oh,
just like, you get so scared you're just in fear of everything they're asking you don't want to share. They end up just saying whatever because you don't want to tell the true story. And I don't know, you just don't feel safe at all. That's why, like, I love what you're saying. It's like you just need to get to the place where you feel like you have supportive people, safety around you to actually start processing your story.
like you can be vulnerable.
Yeah, and vulnerable is okay.
Like you can show visibly that you're in pain
Mm,
instead
yeah,
of having to hide it like you usually do,
yeah,
just to make it through life, right?
right,
To be polite,
mm,
to play by the rules.
right, yes.
I
So,
also,
what? Oh, go ahead.
well, I also think there's something about it's so funny because I'm about to talk about being human and I just cut you off. That's why I'm laughing.
That's okay. I was just gonna ask a question,
No,
but go ahead.
no, for sure. It's about being human too. I think it's an exercise in this doesn't have to be right. In fact, telling my story
Yeah, you don't have
isn't
to get it
wrong to
right.
do,
There's no right
right?
or wrong.
Exactly. So there's this element of it too where we're telling ourselves that it wasn't something that we did. It's not about how we act.
Mm,
This is just in a totally different universe from one in which exactly how you do it is important. No, it's just about telling it. If you want to, that's
hmm
it. There's no right way to do it. It's done.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to so many people feel judged because there's so much misunderstanding, especially in these types of trauma situations where the victim has been groomed or manipulated. And people just say, oh, well, why didn't you just get out of it? Why didn't you just walk away?
Oof.
And they're not understanding. It's like I just told my story with Jeffrey grooming me for hours and hours, you know, just making me feel like I was powerful and amazing and special, before later on knowing what he was going to do later on. That process of, can you tell me more about? 'Cause I'm so curious, and so many people are, that grooming process. What does it really look like? I know it's different with many different situations, but what is grooming?
Essentially, we're talking about someone endearing themselves to you through manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
So, taking advantage through power and control of your emotional availability and
Hmm.
intimacy and making you feel safe. Right. So, there's one thing for you to feel safe
Making you feel
around
safe.
me,
That's so true.
right?
Yes.
It's one thing for you to feel safe around me organically. It's another thing for me to create a world around you in which you will trust me.
Mm-hmm.
You even notice the difference there, right?
Mm-hmm. You
There's a
will trust me.
it's a strategy.
It's so true.
It's shaping your reality.
Mm-hmm.
If you are to truly be safe, you assume when you feel those feelings of trust, right? That's been earned. You don't assume that someone has worked to create that around you, has
Mm-hmm.
warped your sense of what your relationship is.
Well, you don't think they're doing it for a reason.
Of course you don't.
You think it's just you're in the moment.
That's how it's effective, is because you believe that this person is someone who can hold you. This
Mm-hmm.
person is someone who can hold you emotionally. They can be present for you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think that their presence is actually about power.
Mm-mm. You don't think they're controlling you. You don't think they're manipulating you. You just feel in that moment, like you said, it's a very powerful word to say safe, which is what a lot of people are looking for. And it's almost like they can sniff it out and know who needs that safety.
Who can be the most easily controlled,
Mm.
twisted, manipulated?
Yeah.
And usually it's the people that didn't have relationships where they were able to do what? Point out when they were being controlled,
Mhm.
manipulated, silenced, right? It's very easy to sniff out for predators.
Oh, yeah. That's
And
what I'm
so
learning, which makes a lot of sense when I told my story is the many questions about the childhood and where you are now and how you're feeling about things. It's like, oh, this is going to be an easy one.
right? And the more open you are, the more effective this will be.
This makes me so angry.
It's
So
disgusting.
people who are listening at home,
Yes.
how can they, because hopefully not, but if they're in situations like this, how can they feel like, wait a second, I'm not sure if I can trust this person. I feel a little too safe. It almost feels a little too good to be true.
Hmm.
How can I kind of see that this is probably, they're probably trying to groom me? Or is it just, you just don't know?
I think sometimes you can't know
Yeah.
because it depends on when we talk about boundaries, right? We're just talking about how you feel you deserve to be treated. Do you
Mm.
value your own needs? And when I say needs, I literally mean when something feels wrong to you, does it register to you? Do you have narratives around
Now it
how we
does.
should, right? But do we have narratives around whether or not we should ignore our needs in favor of someone who feels more powerful than us?
Mm.
And power can translate to age, it can translate to gender, it can translate to 1,000 things, right? It
Mm-hmm.
can translate to simple position. Is this person a police officer? Is this person a teacher? Is this person someone I should trust? Is this person a therapist?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know, right? And so, depending on our narratives about what our boundaries should look like, it can be really hard to hear that feeling that you described of this doesn't feel right
Mm-hmm.
and listen to it and follow up by either leaving. We don't have to have a conversation with someone when we feel uncomfortable, right? The sky is blue. I'm over you. We can leave.
Right. Well, sometimes you don't
But
even know.
sometimes you
Sometimes you
don't
don't
know.
even know that you've been abused until you hear other people were abused in the exact same way because you trusted this person. Like the American gymnasts, they all trusted the doctor, right? All the
Exactly.
Cosby victims
Yes.
all trusted him because he was on TV and powerful person. Like you just don't even think this person would ever do anything to hurt you.
It can be because of the person. It can be because I actually feel like that wrong feeling in my gut.
You feel
Oh,
it
that must
wrong,
sing.
but you don't.
That must mean that things are actually okay.
Yeah, you just trick your mind to say, "Oh, it's okay. It couldn't be, or maybe it's just me."
Especially if society would generally say, oh, it's just you.
Oh, yeah, most people would say, "Oh, they would never do that. They're so charming. They're so great."
Especially if your whole life, anytime you felt like something was wrong, people said, no, 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 it's just in your head,
Mhm.
right? It really depends on the person. But if I just say, just listen to your gut, right? I'm ignoring all
Right.
those messages. So my first kind of placeholder is, can we create in our body just a sense of when we feel good? What does that mean? Like, what does that look like? Just like that sense of knowing
Yeah.
these people are going to be safe.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell my story to them. The same thing in reverse. When does it feel like everything's wrong?
Mhm.
Bookmark that feeling. Okay, great. Now, is that what you're feeling with anyone in your life? Is that what you're feeling with someone who holds a lot of influence for you?
Mhm.
Which doesn't have to be nefarious, right?
No.
Someone can be really influenceable in your life and they can be a fantastic mentor, for
Mhm.
instance. Or you can feel really uneasy around them pretty consistently, but be telling yourself, oh, but they give me great advice.
Mhm.
Even over the course of a day, only a day,
Only a
that can be
day.
enough
Mhm.
to just have gone through this experience and then go, I don't know what that was about,
Yeah.
but I know I probably shouldn't question it. That feeling.
Mhm.
When we clock that feeling, it's important to sit with it and
Mhm.
go, okay, first off, externalize, especially if we really have this intuition that we shouldn't tell anyone. If this were someone else, would I want them to tell me if they felt this uneasy?
Yeah.
And that's usually a way to go, oh, okay, this didn't feel good. And I'm going to say something to someone I trust, or I'm going to mark this in my mind as having been unsafe.
Mhm.
We don't have to say anything, but we do have to allow ourselves the space to mark that this was wrong,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
So I
That's the
think
first step.
that's the first step.
Right.
But then there's also the angle of if you do feel like this person is doing this to you and potentially others, and you choose, like you said, the difficult path of speaking out,
Mhm.
it's about trusting that feeling.
Yeah.
It's one thing to acknowledge it to yourself, it's another thing to make it real and tell it to other people.
Oh, yeah. It's two completely different things. All right. So let's talk about boundaries. It's a word that's thrown around a lot lately,
Oof.
but how do you define it?
Not the way TikTok does. I'll tell you what.
Oh
No,
no, really?
no, I
Everyone
think
gets their information from TikTok
I
too.
know. I think TikTok has a lot to offer. It also is a place where we can, social media can breed a lot of rights and wrongs.
Of course.
And really, we're just talking about how you want to be treated.
How you want to be treated and how do you
That's
define
it,
that? The boundaries is a big thing for me. And
right?
going into 2024, I have like boundaries that I've never had before.
Mm.
It's just because I want to show up as a newer, better, more powerful version of myself that doesn't allow things like this into my life anymore.
It's about the things that you don't allow,
Okay, so
right?
how do you do that?
How do you identify that?
Mm-hmm.
It starts with what doesn't feel good, what feels good. So I like to use a model of in a relationship where I were to feel seen, where I were to feel heard. What would that look like?
Okay.
What about one where I am not?
Mm-hmm.
Take from experience. Unfortunately, we live in a society where we're not taught to connect with one another in a way that feels good.
That's so
We're taught
important.
transactional
Yeah, everything's so
relationships.
transactional, especially lately with social media and
Certainly.
wannabe Jeffries out there everywhere.
1, 2, the idea of tokenizing people, right? Like followers. Like we're not taught to like really be present.
Right.
Okay. So if we're really present with what's happened to us, with the relationships that we've had, and what's been good, what hasn't been, what we actually need now, which might have changed, right? When I was
Yeah.
in college,
Right.
my needs were very different from now in my mid 30s.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So there's something about being in touch with, and this is going back to the attachment lens, right? My need. So my need might be, I actually need for people to allow me the space to think. It's a really simple one, but if someone demands answers from you now, that doesn't feel good. Just like snapping doesn't feel good at someone.
It's like, oh.
Right? It's aggressive. Okay, so that's a need. That can be a boundary of mine. Now, if we're looking at someone who's decided that they don't like when other people skip over their basic needs. So I'm thinking about one could be, I need to be heard when I'm talking about things that are important to me. I need, if I tell you that I need your full attention, to have your full attention. If you're not going to offer that to me, I don't actually feel like I can invest in this relationship. That's a boundary. It's a really good one.
When you're with someone, pay attention to them, right?
Don't be somewhere else.
No, they're like looking around at everything else the whole time. Yeah.
We're no longer sharing the same emotional space.
It's okay. Just won't be hanging out with you again.
Exactly. Now, if we get deeper, let's say we've experienced too much too fast. We've experienced trauma. I might have a boundary that people don't sneak up on me. Sorry, like not in this house. That's not what we do. So what does that mean? That means that first off, as a person, I implement that boundary on my end. So if I walk into a coffee shop and someone hasn't noticed me, I go, excuse me, I just want to let you know I'm behind you because I don't want to surprise anyone.
Oh, I see. Okay.
In turn, I tell people I don't want to be surprised. So I don't feel like I'm asking for more than I'm giving, but I also make the ask clear. If I don't make the ask clear up front, because it can be really terrifying to implement boundaries, especially if you have a history of trauma.
Yeah,
right?
especially with powerful people or a boss. Like,
you might not want to disclose that much about yourself. You might not want to say, this is important to me. Please do X, Y, Z. It might not be natural to you.
But don't you feel like people get more respect in the long run?
If they state their boundaries up front?
I think people have a hard time doing it, but I just feel like when people do say it, it's like, oh, okay.
I think we value it, but it's a certain style of communicating.
Yeah.
Right? My challenge is you might not feel that way. You might not live in that zone of comfort. A lot of people are internal processors. They really prefer to keep their internal dialogue internal. So it might be easier if someone crosses a boundary, and I'm not talking about something where you feel violated, go home, feel like this is irrevocable. In that case, yes, we do actually want to state our boundaries.
Okay.
So for instance, if we're dating, saying, I don't feel comfortable having sex. I don't feel comfortable going home with you. Up front, that's a safety issue,
Mhm.
we do need to communicate that.
Yeah, that's important to say things up front than waiting till the moment happens and it's harder to speak up and say something.
Far harder,
Mhm.
especially because a lot of hormones are firing.
Mhm.
Literally, I mean, adrenal hormones, our stress hormones are going way more up and up and up,
Mhm.
up than we're used to. So in that moment, it's going to be harder to think clearly, let
Right.
alone communicate.
Mhm.
So these are the types of things where if it comes down to safety, absolutely assert it ahead of time. But if it comes to that just didn't feel right,
Right.
we can tell someone retroactively, hey,
Yeah.
that didn't feel good. I wanted to check in with you.
Mhm.
What was your intention there?
I'm like take some notes here.
Right?
What was
And
your intention with that?
how did you think I would
Yeah.
feel? How did you think
Yeah.
I would feel? I
It
want
almost
to
puts them
place
on the
myself.
spot.
It does.
Yeah.
But it's important information for you because it tells you if that person really did it unknowingly,
Mhm.
and you can watch. Are they expressing empathy? Because then you can say, this is how that made me feel.
Mhm.
I don't want that to happen again.
Okay.
Right?
Then you can see how they truly feel about you too by their response,
And how they
how
react.
they react.
Also links to how they see you after that. They might not make a plan to see you again.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Then
Now you
that's
have your
even better.
information.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I don't value one form of communication over the other, but I will always prioritize safety.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's just boundaries in general, you have chances. You can,
Right.
it's so hard to be in touch with that internal compass,
Right.
listen to it, react.
Yes. And
But if you feel comfortable on the front end, state
Mhm.
them.
And prioritizing safety is what we want.
And also what we call masculine, right? Because
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
you're being so direct is actually, I think, feeling the right to take up space.
Mm-hmm.
Neither good nor bad,
Right.
just something that everyone should be able to feel. And for
Right.
a lot of really good reasons that make sense. Not
Mhm.
good in that they're humane,
Mm-hmm.
but good that I can understand them. Not everyone feels that way.
No, they
All
don't.
right. So we grow into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Test things first with people that might feel safer.
Mm-hmm.
Build it out from there.
Yeah. And to get that confidence it's only going to help you in life.
It
Being
might
just a
help.
little bit more direct and have those boundaries is only going to help avoid these types of situations that we're talking about.
That's it. Like with your survivor girls,
Yeah.
right? You might be able to
Mhm.
be like, hey, actually, I didn't appreciate that you called me a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. You just like practice it.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Now, can you do that with someone else that's outside of that realm of
Yeah.
survivors?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
Let's see.
Actually, I felt really stumbled over there in conversation. Can I
Mm-hmm.
say what I was going to say?
Okay.
All right. Now we might get closer and closer to a rando that we meet on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you just bumped into me. I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Try it.
Mm-hmm.
Try playing with your world in such a way where it actually feels like your world.
I like that. It's so important. Then you feel more in control of your life.
Yes.
So what about our listeners that are in the throes of an abusive relationship right now, in coercive control or power dynamics? What kind of advice would you give them listening right now?
Back when I used to work exclusively in sexual assault crisis centers, right? Or when I was more present there as an advocate, as a therapist, the statistic was it's going to take 6 to 7 times before you leave an abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to try that
Mm-hmm.
many times.
I believe that's true.
And I really like to hold that
Mm-hmm.
statistic because it's probably more informed now in the research, but it really described the push-pull of not only what's happening emotionally, but also resources.
Mm-hmm. Resources.
You might
Most
try,
important.
right? You might try and leave and find, oh, I don't have anyone,
Yeah.
anything.
Anyone, the means to leave.
These people I thought would help me
Yeah.
fell
Aren't
through.
there. Mm-hmm.
All right, so I had to go back. Okay, next time, what's that look like? Maybe
Yeah.
my life was in danger the first time. Okay, great. How can I do this safely?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I need to reach out to try and make this work? So that's like when we're planning to leave. But
Right.
I think the first piece of this is internal. It's how am I being treated in this relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Do I feel like I have to walk on eggshells? I.e., do I feel like I have to walk a really thin line? I can't really act too far over here like this. too far over here like this. I have to act a certain way in order to get basic respect and not set this person off. If we can identify that that's where we are, that's the type of relationship we're in, then the question becomes, okay, can I accept that that's my reality? Can I accept that I deserve more than that? And can I accept that this is going to be difficult but worthwhile to not be here for? That there are better things outside of this.
Yes.
Each of those answers dictates where you go next. But I think you owe it to yourself to ask them.
And like we were saying at the beginning, finding that support system is so important. Because I always find that people say, oh, why didn't you leave? But they didn't give you any support to leave either.
This is one of the things where I'm baffled as
Family.
to, it's almost like they're asking from the vantage point of, I didn't want you to get hurt, but they're not considering the pain you were in
No.
and how difficult it was to
No.
feel like you could ask and not feel ashamed, because that's the type of narrative we tell around this,
That's
right?
sad.
You must have gotten yourself into this mess. Why'd you stay for so long? They're asking from this place of, I didn't want you to get hurt, and yet they're hurting you by asking the questions this way, instead of, how could I have been more available to you?
Exactly.
Right? Because it's not about their shame.
Mm-hmm.
It's about your pain.
Mm-hmm.
They're making it about their shame.
Yeah.
And they're phrasing it in such a way where they make their shame yours.
Mm-hmm.
It's so insidious.
Oh, it's terrible. So they need to find a support system somehow, some way, fast.
Anyone who's in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that support system, that support network can look different ways, right? It can look like a lot of different really beautiful support lines. So I always think about Trans Lifeline or Black Line in the United States, but there are a lot of different places that we can call that are free, that are
Right.
anti-carceral, where we can just get support 24/7.
Great.
Fantastic.
Great.
So looking up those lines around you, if you have slowly, as often is the case in an abusive relationship, had your support network dwindle down and you don't know who to reach out to. That's one option. Another option is, if you're lucky enough to have a healing person in your life, so that could look like a therapist, that could look like a shaman, that could look like a friend who is a really beautiful, present soul, right?
That would be nice.
In any of these cases, reaching out to them, lining up that support, and making sure that you're in a safe space when you talk to them, i.e. somewhere where you will not be in physical danger.
Yeah, the person can hear you.
Exactly.
Yeah, be safe.
But then there's also a lot of the time we're convinced by abusers, by predators, that no one will believe us.
Oh, yeah. That's a common one they say.
And yet we have people who would.
Yeah, you do.
We just tell ourselves in these situations, it's so common for survivors to tell me, I don't feel like these people will understand.
Right.
And I
That's
ask,
common.
right? It is
Right. It is
common and
very
it makes sense, especially in this
I've been
disparate
there.
world.
I've been there. Yeah.
We also just live very separated lives nowadays, right? And yet, can we try? Can we try reaching out? Because I guarantee you, any try is going to be better than living in an abusive relationship. Let's just try it. Let's see. It's very possible that someone might rebuff us or say like they don't know what to do. It's also possible that they'll say, oh my gosh, yes, what can I do?
Yeah.
Who can I call?
It's worth it.
Take the chance. Take a chance on yourself. Right?
So we also like to end our conversation with a question. From now on, finish the sentence.
From now on, think about your story as part of the beautiful, inextricable web of human experiences that deserve to be spoken aloud.
That was powerful. I want that for everyone.
Me too. That all beings may know peace.
I feel like this has been a good healing conversation. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
Is there anything else on your mind?
Everything.
I'm happy to answer something that wasn't on the questions.
Oh,
if you'd
really?
like. Yes.
For me, it's always most important from my journey. The hardest thing was just not having people there to support me. That was just the hardest thing. That's why I'm saying I want that for others. Somehow just finding someone that you can talk to. I don't feel like we can all do this on our own.
I don't think anyone can.
Mm-mm.
I think that's what makes it, goosebumps. I think that's what makes it so beautiful, the act of healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that's done alone.
No, I've realized that.
Right? But it can, sometimes for years, someone's best friend can be a book that shows them a little bit of light.
Mm.
And that leads to a person that they can tell just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to a group of people they can tell a little bit more to. It's like an ever expanding web, right? It just goes more and more circles out and out and out until all of a sudden that weight feels like it's light enough to pass to someone else. It doesn't just sit in the essence of our being. But that loneliness, the most fascinating thing about it to look at as a therapist is to see how many people feel that void. You're never alone. It's a matter of finding the people that can hold it, but you're never alone.
You're never alone. It's true. Thank you, Ocean.
Of course.
This is From Now On. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Lisa Phillips. Elizabeth Wyndham is our senior producer. Christopher Leon is the editor, and Jose Oriana is our studio producer. Our theme music is Many Worlds by Memory Theory. If you have any thoughts, questions, or stories about your own views on topics discussed on From Now On, email us at fromnowonpod@gmail.com. And please follow, rate, comment, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. If today's conversation resonated with you and you are seeking more support in your own healing journey, if you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, help is available. Call 800-656-HOPE. If you or someone you know is being trafficked, contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Text 233-733. That's Be Free. PAVE is a 501c3 nonprofit creating a world free from sexual violence and building communities to support survivors. To learn more, go to shatteringthesilence.org. Speak Out, Act, Reclaim, SOAR, is dedicated to providing a safe and empowering space for survivors of sex trafficking to reclaim their stories and stand up for themselves and each other. That's www.speakoutactreclaim.org.